My reading journey began about 11 years ago with these. A bunch of books that a past dear friend of mine have so graciously gifted me after dumpster diving. And ever since then, I have read a plethora of books. Some I bought, some I read at the school library, some I read online for free, and some my most amazing Amma has bought on Facebook Marketplace. And yet, out of the entire library of books that I have consumed so voraciously, there is only one book that by far is the best book I have ever read in my entire life, and I will gladly perish at my own hands on that hill. This is The Weavers of Saramir trilogy by Chris Wooding. My mom got this book for me about 7 years ago from Facebook Marketplace, along with a bunch of all those other huge books. And I believe I finished this in about a month. I believe I finished this huge tome of a book in about a month. And look, it even has the name of the person who owned this previously and when they bought it over here. And this is where I signed the title, and as you can see, this was where I signed my pathetic signature when I first got it, as claim of my ownership. The Weavers of Saramir is an adult fantasy fiction published back in 2004, a year before I decided to curse the world with my birth. This is an omnibus edition that has all three of the books in the trilogy in one huge tome, and the story is set in a mystical oriental empire known as Saramir, in which exists a certain type of people called an abhorrent, any individual born with magical talents and abilities. Abhorrents are looked down upon and are hunted relentlessly by weavers, who are also magic users, but the only difference is that they are employed by nobility. The weavers work by plunging into the fabric of the world and bending the strings or the threads to their will and whim, and in doing so, they become corrupted and disfigured, and their minds distort. Our main character is Kaikutu Makaima. I hope I'm pronouncing that name right. The daughter of a noble family who were killed at the beginning of the book. She is thankfully saved by her handmaid, Asara, who may or may not have some secrets of her own, and it is revealed that Kaiku herself is an abhorrent. Meanwhile, the highly respected and powerful Empress of Saramir, Anais to Erenima, learns that her daughter, the heir Empress of Saramir, is also an abhorrent. The very thing she feared and the very flames she tried to put out. And now the story follows not only Kaiku and her struggles with her powers and her real story and the future she feels, but also the turmoil in the main empire of Saramir, with Anais, her daughters, and the main weavers of the kingdom, all with the growing blaze of a civil war breaking out. This series is incredibly rich and fast-paced and intriguing, and the dialogue and writing and pacing never ever once bore me out. It only pushes you to keep reading, to keep exploring and anticipating the coming chapters. The series never once felt like it was trying to glamorize or trivialize Asian cultures or Oriental cultures and myths and history that so many other stories in this genre have tried to do. It does what every author should be doing, taking inspiration, then building a deep world inspired by that, and letting it stew to be its own rich thing. What with the fictional weather patterns, and the animals, and the rituals, and the flora, and the fauna, and the religions, and the myths, and the history, and whatnot. One gripe I have with the series is the sheer amount of sexual violence in this work. Especially when it comes to the women who are at the receiving end of this violence. I do believe there is nothing wrong with involving sexual violence in your stories or your writing, so long as it has a purpose and point in the story. It doesn't dumbify or trivialize the characters in the slightest, and it pushes the plot forward, and it doesn't get any point across that isn't virtue signaling or creating this inspirational character, or that garbage that we're always seeing when we see victims of sexual violence in fiction and media. The violence was just too ick for me, honestly. But believe me, there are plenty of strong, independent, capable women in this book. But another thing I think that needs to be mentioned is that this book is not a book with jokes or banter or comedy or humor. It is a bleak, serious world that takes its message very seriously. This book literally had me squirming, and I've read Womb without so much as batting an eye. Is there something wrong with me? I feel like there's something wrong with me. Now that I've said that out loud. Great world, great characters, great plot, great pacing, and especially great villains and antagonists. This book is by far my most favorite book ever. The best fantasy I have ever had the blessing of reading that actually had drove such a great impact on my own writing. And I do believe that when I eventually become a director, this is the first book I will ever turn into a full-length series. So yeah, that is by far my most favorite book of all time, The Braided Path by Chris Wooding. Thank you so much for sticking around. Let me know in the comments what your favorite book of all time is. Any opinions you have on The Braided Path if you've read it, if you had the blessing of reading it. And may the rest of your day be as you so rightfully deserve it to be.